Welcome, David. David Williams is a speaker and instructor on native edible plants for various conservation groups and outreach organizations, including Wild Ones Columbus Chapter, Appalachia Ohio Alliance, the Columbus Garden School, Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed, Stratford Ecological Center, Columbus Natural History Society, and the Native American Indian Center of Central Ohio. He's a winemaker using native and non-native botanicals to make homemade wines. He's a poet specializing in eco-horror, where he not only highlights the fears and worries of environmental destruction, but also shows the darker side to Mother Nature's beauty. So welcome, David. I'm sure we'll have some questions after your talk. So
Yeah.
Feel free to share your screen. You should have
Yes.
access. Okay.
Let me do that right now. Okay, so as we stated before, my name is David Williams. I think Sherry did a really good job explaining everything that I have to offer. By all means, if you want my contact information towards the end, I can give that to you. This is a little bit of a shorter version of a presentation I've done for other chapters of Wild Ones, as well as NACO, the Native American Indian Center of Central Ohio, and FLOW, Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed. I'm sure I don't have to say what's a native and what's a non-native for Wild Ones. However, I do like to just do like a quick refresher. It's any plant that was here before pre-colonizer or pre-Columbian. And it's also the term invasive also sometimes gets used for native plants. Like someone might say that the passion flower vine is invasive. Well, it's aggressive. Or goldenrod is aggressive. It's not invasive. It can't be because it's native. That being said, passion vine is very aggressive. It's very sneaky where it likes to go. But that just means there's more of it to use, both for us and for the insects, birds, etc. Invasive, obviously, the two big ones here in Ohio, as far as plants go, are the Japanese honeysuckle and garlic mustard, both of which have edible properties to them. Honeysuckle you can eat or use the flowers to make tea. That's pretty much the only thing that they're good for. I know there's someone here in Columbus that makes benches out of the honeysuckle, which is surprising. Garlic mustard was brought over here by the French as a salad crop. It grows everywhere. The pictures you see, the bottom right one is one that's going to be a little bit more tasty. The upper left is the mature variety. It gets a little more bitter the more mature it gets, but obviously if it's invasive, we want to get it out of there. Another one that I don't have pictured, but I actually picked some just last weekend is autumn olive. You can take the red berries from the olive before it's completely matured and make jams out of it. We actually just did that last weekend. The good thing is if they're invasive, you don't have to worry about picking too much because we want it gone anyways. Some tools that I like to use, a hiking shoes, a nice pair of shoes or boots. Waterproof is one I always like to say is good. It's not necessary. Gloves, if you're looking to pick something like nettle that might sting or hurt you. And then any sort of like pruning instrument or a harvesting knife, because there are some plants that we want to take clippings from, like staghorn sumac, which I'll cover in a little bit. And we want to try and do as little harm to the plant that we're taking from as we can. So that means doing nice clean cuts if we need to do something that involves a pruning tactic. Field guides, notebooks. I also say iNaturalist. If you don't want to have to lug around like 3 field guides with you all the time. iNaturalist is really good. The Peterson field guide is really helpful because it's small. It can fit in almost any bag, and it has a lot of information with it. So it's pretty comprehensive. There are some things that get looked over, but it's a really good resource. With harvesting native plants, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass. This is a book written by a botanist and also a member of the Potawatomi Nation, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, she talks about the honorable harvest and what that means, understanding what's taking care of you so you can take care of it, giving gifts and reciprocity. For me, that means either if I'm picking something in an area, I maybe look to see if there's an invasive plant I can remove or litter I can pick up. You never take more than half. You never take the first, so you're ensured that you never take the last, and that there's some leftover for whatever comes along after you, whether that be another forager or a animal or just the plant itself. And then you also give thanks. This book was a really key point for me in furthering my love for nature and also going into foraging. It's a pretty dense read. However, she also narrates the audiobook, and all of that you can get from your local library or through library adjacent apps like Libby. You can just download the audiobook and listen. I would highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. A few of the species that are still out, luckily, y'all are about 2 hours north of Columbus, so you're probably about 2 weeks behind us. So you should still have these around. The first is staghorn sumac. All sumacs are edible. The berries are. If the berries are red, if the berries are white, it's poison sumac. Which actually just got reclassified. It's not technically a sumac at all. What I have pictured here is what the staghorn sumac berry clusters look like. They can be used as a seasoning. If you've ever had Middle Eastern or Mediterranean cuisine, specifically sitar, the main ingredient is sumac. It's just Mediterranean sumac, not North American sumac. The easiest way to use it is to make what's called sumac aid or sumac lemonade, and you just take a few bunches of the berries, kind of macerate them a little bit. I like to maybe just put them in some cheesecloth and smack them with a rolling pin, and then you dunk it in water, and you can let that sit for anywhere from a couple hours to like a whole 24 hours. The longer you let it soak, the more you're going to get out of it. And the result is something that looks and tastes just like pink lemonade, just without all those harmful dyes. The other one that I have pictured here is American elderberry, also called black elderberry. There are 2 parts of this plant that are edible. One is the flowers, which by this time of year are gone. The flowers can be used in teas. A really common practice is to either make elderflower simple syrup or dipping them in batter and kind of making an elderflower fritter or kind of like a tempura. The berries are edible when they look a lot like this. So the darker, the more ripe they are. There are some weird things in them that a lot of people say to just cook them to dissipate those potentially harmful chemicals. The green berries are poisonous. However, there is a book called Forage Harvest Feast, which I have later on in the presentation, that says if you pickle them, so essentially you're using the unripe green berries to make capers, and you pickle them and you ferment them, and that makes the once poisonous berries edible, which is really cool. I actually have it going in my fridge right now as kind of a test to see what it looks like. What I find really cool is that both the sumac and the elderberries are trees that clone. They send out canes just like raspberries do. And what's really cool is both of these trees were historically used by Native Americans as spiles for maple tapping. Both of them have kind of a hollow inside, like a hollow heartwood. So that could be one reason why. The other really interesting thing is because they do send out canes every year, that using some of the younger or straighter canes for spiles for maple tapping wouldn't necessarily completely harm the plant because they're sending out clones. So it's kind of a sustainable maple spile maple tapping source that's completely natural. Some other shrubs, I would be really sad if I didn't mention this. I didn't get a picture of the ripe berries, but the ripe berries are super, super red. What you see on the left is actually the flowering. I think this picture was taken in March. It's one of the first things to flower in the springtime, and the flowers are edible. Actually, everything on this bush is edible. The leaves and the bark and the twigs can be used in like a saute. So think of how animal bones are used to make flavored broths. It's the same thing. The big thing is the berries. They can be dried and used as a one-to-one substitute for allspice. In fact, Integration Acres, which is owned by the founder of the Ohio Pawpaw Festival, sells spice bush berries like by the bag that you can just buy and use. You can eat the berries fresh. There's not a lot of flesh on them. It's really leathery, so you kind of have to scrape it off with your teeth. But it tastes exactly like a red hot or like hot cinnamon candy, which is just really like fun to tell people. I'm sure a lot of people know what a spice bush looks like. The leaves are alternating. And one thing I always like to do, if I'm not 100% sure if it's a spice bush or not, is just to rub one of the leaves and then to smell my fingers. And those volatile oils that are on the leaves will just instantly be able to be picked up by you. It's like once you start like touching all the green stuff, you start noticing all these different things, not just touch, but smell and sight and how things interact. By all means, touch the green. Just make sure it's not poison ivy before you touch it. I made that mistake once. Some festive flowers that we have. Again, both of these can be used in drinks. The passion vine flowers and leaves can be used as teas. However, you do want to add heat to it. There's some compounds in them that resemble cyanide. It's a really trace amount, but it is completely dissipated with heat. So drying the leaves or sauteing the leaves, you can even make like a green salad like collards. The thing with the leaves and the flowers is it's kind of a sleepy time tea. So when I mentioned earlier about the bees falling asleep, it's because they even extract that sleepy time chemical when they're feeding on the nectar. It's used a lot in people who can't sleep, people who have anxiety. If you obviously don't want to put dinner guests to sleep, if you add fat into greens that you're sauteing, it'll completely neutralize the sleepy time effects as well. The fruit, and this goes with the fact that it's a subtropical fruit that's growing here in Ohio, the fruit ripens really, really, really late. Here, it's maybe late September or October. So maybe up in Cleveland, if you had some, it would be middle of October before the fruit's ripe, which is just wild to think that this tropical tasting fruit is ripe and when everyone's thinking of pumpkin spice. The other one I like to mention is blue balm. I don't know if anyone still has some blooming or not. Mine's pretty much done, but both the flowers and the leaves are edible and can be used in like teas or drinks. I like just, since it's part of the mint family, I even like just taking a couple leaves and subbing that into like cocktails or sodas that I would otherwise use mint for. It's just a completely different taste though. It's kind of spicy, a little peppery. The flowers can also be used if you feel so inclined to go real crazy, can be made into a salve. It has antiseptic qualities, so people used it as a balm for bee stings, which kind of goes along with that cure grows near the source idea, kind of like jewelweed and poison ivy. But both of them are pretty much like tea focused. I've tried several different kinds of bee balms, and they all have their own different nuances, both the species and just each individual plant. So just kind of keep that in mind. But the good thing is with bee balm and passion vine is they're so voracious in how they spread, you're probably never going to deplete your resource at all. I always like to stress for people to do their own research. Just because something's okay for me to eat doesn't mean it's okay for someone else to eat. You might have an allergic reaction. I really had to study into that when I was preparing syrups for people, because you can make, well, it's not maple syrup, it's black walnut syrup. But it's like, well, if you have a tree nut allergy, will that affect you? And there was this whole rabbit hole of research I had to do. It turns out no. So that's really helpful that I didn't hurt anyone with a nut allergy. But there's always like conflicting information that I find, specifically around things like passion vine or like sassafras that may or may not have compounds in it that people have found that are detrimental, but have been used historically. It's just now we have a little bit more information. And there's conflicting stuff because of like where people are. Maybe they use different terminology as far as like different common names instead of scientific names, or maybe they're from Europe, so they're using a different passion vine instead of the passiflora. And it's just like, do your own research. If it's your first time eating something, don't gorge yourself on it. Even something good in a huge amount is bad. And one thing I always share is there was on a field hike I was on, someone was regaling me of the story of this individual who worked for the Ohio EPA. They found a grove of pawpaws, and it was around lunchtime, and they were starving and had forgotten their lunch back in their truck. So they just gorged themselves on pawpaws. And like, well, it's good for you. And they're pawpaws, so I know I can eat them. And then about 4 hours later, he realized he maybe shouldn't have eaten like 2 pounds of pawpaw because of all that fiber. So even anything good in a large amount can be bad. So I always say if it's your first time eating something, just like try a little bit, just a little taste to see if your body's going to have an adverse reaction or not. Because it is something new to you, so you got to get yourself used to it. And then you also got to figure out if you actually enjoy it or not. These are some of the recommended readings that I have. All of these you can get from local library. Midwest Foraging is really nice. Has when, where, and how to forage for it, what to use in it, and all color pictures. Peterson Field Guide is very comprehensive, light, easy to carry with you if you're going out on a hike. Stalking the Wild Asparagus in Nature's Garden for Victory and Peace, which is by George Washington Carver, and is a free PDF you can just download online through the Library of Congress. And the Yule Gibbons book, which I was introduced to by my mother-in-law, who's a crazy hippie lady. And she was like, you got to read this book. I knew about this book back then. These are a few other books. The Drunken Botanist is a really fun read if you're interested in why, how, and when we started fermenting different crops. Forage Harvest Feast is part cookbook, part field guide. The amount of recipes she has is absurd. I mean, and it's some weird stuff. It's not just, here's this thing, make it into a tea. No, she does all these like compound butters, all these pickles and fermentations, and like by that I mean well, pickling and fermentation is kind of the same thing, but there's like, oh God, there's just so many, and she really uses like the whole animal. So like if you make one recipe, you're going to have leftover X. Well, she then has a recipe for your leftover X to use in recipe Y. And it's just, it's a really good read. Wild Crafted Cocktail I got as a Christmas gift. It has a wild persimmon margarita with a spice bush berry like sugar rim, which is just a wild combination. It has a recipe for pickled fiddleheads to use as a garnish instead of olives. And then one really big one, which if you're a PBS Passport subscriber, you will have access to is Leg Stroud's Wild Harvest. He is a avid adventurist and talks about eating out in nature, but he brings to the table a friend of his who is a chef, and so he gives him these wild ingredients, and he makes these amazing meals out of them. And it's just this whole mindset of preserving the earth to give us more gifts is a part of the ethos in that show, and I would recommend watching it. Then there's some more recommended readings. All of these books pictured here are written by Native Americans. Corn Dance, which is specifically a vegetarian, if not full vegan, cookbook on Native American ingredients and like contemporary uses. The Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen, which was awarded a James Beard Award. That was my first foray into using sumac as an ingredient, but he has a few other ingredients as well that are really interesting and just goes into contemporary use using historical knowledge. Original Local, Tawa, and the New Native Kitchen are all kind of the same idea. They're all really interesting reads and will kind of make you think about stuff that you might have in your backyard in a completely different light from the lens of people who were here first. And then again, braiding sweetgrass. I really wish I got to hear her talk when she was in town last year, but we had some scheduling conflicts come up. But if you haven't read Braiding Sweetgrass, I would highly recommend it. It is one of those reads. And in October, she'll be having a new book come out that is specifically about the serviceberry, which I'm real excited about because that was one of the first non-mushroom plants that we got into with native foraging. And then the end result, we have the tarts that are on the left. Those are made with our first year passion vine fruits. We were really surprised that we even got a third year one, but we actually got enough fruits to make tarts out of them. Maple syrup. Any maple can give you maple syrup, but it is a lot of time and a lot of either firewood or propane to get maple syrup out of sap. Service berries. I mentioned earlier that I make wines. That's a picture of sumac wine that I made. Still kind of kept that pink lemonade look to it. And then the persimmon margaritas, which I will say was weird. That took a little bit more nuance than what we were prepared for. The native persimmons have a lot of tannins in them. So you get that kind of dry mouth feel unless you kind of cook it down and kind of leach off some of those tannins. And then another tenet of the Honorable Harvest is sharing. It's not just using it for yourself, but this stuff always seems to taste better around a group. And you see people's eyes light up for the first time when they taste snickerdoodle cookies made with spice bush berries instead of cinnamon, or sumac or passion fruit, Turkish delight, or any of the syrups or saps that we've made. So if you get the chance to try some of it yourself, let other people try it too, because it'll make them super excited and interested into saving our natural world, but also it'll make you feel really good too. And that's it. I'd love to open it up to questions if I haven't taken up too much time.
Great.
No, thank you. That was perfect. Gosh, there's so much to think about. The margarita, I would love to try. That would be.
Oh, I see someone.
I have a question about the passion fruit. I don't know if I'm the person you saw though. So when it ripens, does it ripen into something that is like as good as it at its best? Or like in terms of like fruiting, or is it something where it like for me like fig almost needs more time. I know it's not native, but are you
The persimmon?
at its best when you're the passion fruit?
Oh, the passion fruit. It is completely 100% different than the gooey kind of kiwi passion fruit that you see at the store. What the native passion fruit looks more like when you open it is a pomegranate. So the pulp that is covering each individual seed is the edible part. Again, it doesn't ripen until probably sometimes mid-October. But each individual fruit will feel kind of heavy, just like any fruit that you get at the supermarket. If it feels heavy for its size, that's how you know it's ripe. But what's really weird is it gets its name Maypop for like a reason, because you like squeeze it and it feels like there's air in there. And if you squeeze it too hard, it'll pop. But yeah, it's a lot different than the tropical passion fruit. If I Let's see, does that link have a look to the inside? No. And I don't think I took a picture of the inside at all anytime soon. Yeah, the inside is completely different than the tropical passion fruit. It is more reminiscent of in the way that the fruit encases the seeds in like the little drops. It's more reminiscent of a pomegranate than a normal passion fruit. But it does take a really long time to ripen. It'll sit on our vines. Our vines, the flowers that are already pollinated, you can already see little tiny fruits, and they'll sit there for another 2 months before they're ready.
I have a question about I have two questions actually. What was the name of the group that does the Pawpaw festival? Integration something?
Integration Acres. The
Acres.
owner of
Okay.
Integration Acres is the founder of the Pawpaw Festival.
Okay.
They sell all sorts of stuff. Actually,
Right.
just hold on for 1 second.
Sure.
Has anybody here on the call been to the Ohio Pawpaw Festival before?
I now have 3 pawpaws, so I haven't been to a festival yet, but they're growing and they're
That's good.
doing well.
It's far for us from Cleveland. It's a little bit, it's a
Right.
little bit south from here.
Yeah.
So I was lucky enough to try this at Ohio State's Earth Day Festival,
Ooh,
and my local nursery, Scioto Gardens, had some on a shelf, so I picked this
oh,
up. It's pawpaw jam that has spicebush berry in it. And
okay.
I will say
Super.
I'm not that big of a fan of pawpaw. I love that people are excited about it and that it's a native,
Right.
but I'm just not a fan of bananas. So I'm not a fan of pawpaw. But
Okay.
this jam with the spice bush is just amazing.
All
And I'm
right.
sure they have it on their website too.
Good to know. And the other question I had was when you're making your wine, do you do natural fermentation?
I do not.
Oh,
I use commercial yeast. My first wine I did, I just used Fleischmann's bread yeast, and it turned out fine. It
sure.
was a pain in the butt, but it turned out fine. The one time I decided to not boil cider and use whatever yeast was present,
Right.
I had some weird stuff happen.
Yeah.
Either some mold started to develop, which is easy enough to get rid of. if it's on top, there's stuff you can add.
Sure.
But
That's-
I haven't done that with my wines. I haven't done wild fermentation.
Okay.
I've done it with I made a fermented serviceberry syrup where it's literally all it is a 1-to-1 ratio of serviceberries and sugar. And you put it in a jar and you shake it. And then you shake it every day and let it sit on your counter for like 7 days. And then you put it in your fridge. And that's literally all you do.
Wow.
And that, because I didn't put any yeast in it, was wild fermentation.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious. Thanks. It was a great presentation. It was so interesting.
Thank you. Yeah. If anyone, I'm gonna go ahead and put my email up in the chat. If anyone has any other organizations that you all are affiliated, that members are affiliated with, or other Wild Ones chapters, by all means, give out my information.
Great.
I can't tell you how many events I go to, and I'm like, didn't I see you at this other thing that just happened at this other group? And it's just this all interconnected web.
Right.
Yes, I feel like the circles that include stuff like this are small, so you always run into the same people, and hey, they're usually pretty cool people. So
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
yeah, thank you, David. We appreciate
And I
your
had to
time.
laugh about the E.O. Gibbons reference because I read that in college many years ago.
Yeah, I was
In my hippie days.
my mother-in-law
Yeah.
handed me her copy of Stalking the Wild Asparagus, and I was just flipping through it, and I'm like, oh, he has a whole chapter about cattails.
He does.
And it got me so excited.
It made me laugh.
Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you.
And the email address or contact info is where?
It's in the
Oh,
chat.
I thought I put it
In
in the
chat.
chat.
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
No, I'm in chat. I didn't see it. I'll look. I'll keep looking.
You might have to scroll down.
Yeah, I'll find it. No worries.
I can see it. You just have to go down, yeah.
Oh, this place does a spice bush stout.
Ooh.
Okay, I'm gonna have to. So speaking of brewing, in my connections with Appalachia Ohio Alliance, I've started.
Got it.
Well, and I guess with Float, Float's been doing a lot with them too. Appalachia Ohio Alliance, we had a thing going with Nocterra Brewing here in Columbus.
Okay.
And now Flow is doing stuff with them. Nocterra is extremely philanthropic as far as giving back to local organizations. So every month they have a Take a Hike beer because they're all about the outdoors. And each year or each month, they give part of the proceeds to that specific beer sales to a organization. Depending on the month, sometimes it's Friends of the Lower Unintended Watershed, sometimes it's the Metro Parks, Delaware County Women's Shelter, just all sorts of organizations. And they have a really good message and a really awesome team. And I've been trying to get them to, because their whole symbol is a butterfly, or well, it's a moth. I've been trying to get them to connect with the Ohio Lepidopterist Society, because I feel like that'd be really cool. And obviously all the different plants that are hosts to butterflies and moths.
That's cool. That's cool. I wish there was a place like that up here. That
Right.
sounds like a very, like, if I were to start a brewery, I feel like that's what that's how I
Right.
would do it too.
I'm sad they didn't get on the spice bush first, because it's like, ooh, that's a spice bush swallowtail, that's Lepidoptera. You guys have a moth as your emblem.
Right.
Make some beer with spice bush. That's really cool.
That can be our side gig, Janice.
Yes.
Oh,
Wild Ones, spice bush beer. Well, it could be like ginger beer, but with spice bush. Make it non-alcoholic.
It sounds like a fantastic fundraiser opportunity.
And just think how many signs we could sell.
For sure.
I'll get one. I'll get one.
All right. We're gonna keep moving. Thank you, David. Feel free to stay on and sit with us, or if you have things to do, feel free to jump off. So
Sure.
thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.